Alrighty, guys and gals. I hope y'all are having a good morning, and I hope you are here and with us live so y'all can catch this in person and perhaps ask some questions because we're joined by an outstanding guest today, Mr. Rick Prado. He is a PJ vet, which I'll be anxious to hear about some stories about that because we've had one other prior PJ vet on, and we honestly didn't get to cover too much of it. But a lot of people will know Mr. Rick, hopefully because of his book on his life as a CIA shadow warrior, Black Ops by Mr. Rick Prado. It is a wonderful book. I, of course, already finished mine, but he held many positions at the CIA, including working for SAD, and I believe he worked his way up to chief of ops at the CTC Center, and I want to say a CIA chief of station. But we'll find out more here today because, as you guys know, I'm very Vietnam oriented, and today we're going to be covering a lot post Vietnam. So I'm going to be here learning just like you guys are. So before I take up any more time, I want to say thank you to Mr. Rick for joining us today, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. My pleasure being here.
Would you like to give us a description? Your book goes into great detail, and really one thing I've, and especially as someone who has lived through this and has firsthand knowledge on this, growing up down south, you wouldn't think of this happening on college campuses, but of course, when I got to college 10 years ago, in the history department, I began seeing a notorious figure on a T-shirt that I did not ever recognize, didn't know who it was. It was a man in a beret and a beard, and I didn't quite know if he was Spanish, if he was maybe a Vietnam veteran that had just grown his hair out. And come to find out in my history readings, it's Che Guevara. And I kept wondering why all these people were wearing these T-shirts. Well, how do they even know about him? And in my readings, I found out, boy, have they been duped into buying shirts and supporting and thinking they're supporting a freedom fighter. Could you talk to us a little bit about what growing up in Cuba was like, and what the Castro and the Che Guevara regime was like at that point in time?
Yeah, I was about 7 or 8 years old when the revolution was at its peak. Speaking of Che Guevara was actually running the operations at the Escambray Mountains, which was the town that I lived in was the first town when you came out of the mountains. And they did raids on my town. So firefights really early in my life. The bottom line with people that wear a Che Guevara T-shirt is ignorance. Okay, first of all, you're talking a failed revolutionary. Second, you're talking a cold-blooded murderer. Kind of things that Che Guevara did was tie people to the post, people, political prisoners, and he would tie three of them up, and he would come in with a pistol, and sometimes it was loaded, sometimes it was not, and that's a form of torture that very few people could understand. I have confronted a few people that wear those, and one that I can't mention his name because he's known. I walked up to him and said, "You know what that T-shirt is good for?" And he goes, "No." I said, "To put a bullet right here in the guy's head." And he was shocked. And then I told him exactly what this was about. He told me I'd never wear this shirt again. So, but it was indicative of the kind of cancer that communism is. I had an idyllic childhood. My father was middle class. He had a '57 Pontiac. I had a horse before I had a bicycle. And very shortly after Castro took over, that changed. I mean, it was a drastic change. Within 6 months, my dad's business had been confiscated. He had a small coffee roasting company. I think he employed like 10 people. And the indoctrinations in the school started. That was one of the big things for me then, about an 8 or 9 year old, going to school and having the teachers tell you that if anybody in your family speaks ill of the revolution or Castro, that you're mandated to report them. And sadly, some kids did. My parents decided to leave the Cuba, come to the United States. We had our visas, U.S. visas. What we did not have was the exit permit, so my parents couldn't get out. They got me out through the Catholic Church, and I spent the first 8 months of my life in the United States in an orphanage in Pueblo, Colorado. I, that was a lot tougher on my parents than it was on me. My dad had brought me up to be stoic and to, as he would call it, cowboy up. But imagine putting, your only child on an airplane at the age of 10, not knowing if you're going to see them again. That's if that's not indicative of parental love for freedom, I don't know what is.
That your book is it's a very it's a tough read there for a large chunk of the book, because you're seeing, as you said, your town is being raided, and your father, if I remember correctly, you actually had a family in the revolution, did you not?
Yeah, there was one revolutionary guy, a guerrilla in the Escambray, who was a second cousin of my dad. And you got to understand that before Castro took over, a lot of people thought that it was a good thing. We included, of course. My opinion didn't count back then, but nonetheless, I mean, it was like, I think one of the few that was not fooled was my grandfather, because he was too smart for that. But what happened was they were going to raid the town. And Manolete, I think it was his name, was one of the team leaders. He came into our house middle of the night, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, to tell my dad that they were going to attack the town, and that he was going to be he would allow me to leave, but that my parents could not leave because of that. That could tip the hand that since they knew that there was a blood relation there. So like I said, I was 7 or 8 years old, and I'm looking at this guy that's got this straggly beard and and a beret and all this other, but he was a real fighter. So anyway, I did experience that. I came back to my town right after it was taken over, because now they were going to the capital of that then state. That's where I was at. So yeah.
Can only imagine what, well, I mean, especially you as a young child, as you said, you're not really aware of what all's going on. And there again, I believe you mentioned in the book, your first firefight that you actively remember or know of, you were 7 years old. I mean, how many kids can say that growing up? I mean, that's some quick growing up. And then with your father and your mother having to make this family history and life altering decision to either let you stay and hopefully you don't get hurt or swept up in the revolution, or to get you to safety to America and let you live the American dream. And your father and mother wanted the best for you, and they decide to send you on that trip. Could you speak a little bit the details of what led up to that and how you inevitably got here?
Yeah, like I said, my parents couldn't get out at the time, and out of desperation, they got me out through the Catholic Church. I don't know. I think the hardest thing was watching my parents, especially my mom, cry. My dad wasn't crying; he was biting his lip, literally. Um, but my dad did something that was very indicative of his way of dealing with me. He put his hand on my shoulder and he told me, "I will see you again. You have my word." And I think that helped me tremendously in the orphanage, because the orphanage, any orphanage is not where you want to send your kid to go off to summer camp. You got 2 or 3 different cultures with 2 or 3 different languages, and a lot of pissed off kids. Nobody likes being an orphan. So there was violence, there was all kinds of discipline, but I fared it very well. I remember hearing kids at night crying in their bed. I never cried, because I had that security blanket that my dad, who was my first hero and was till the day he died, um, had given me his word that he would, and that I knew he was coming out. I knew my dad, if he had to swim, he would have done it. So yeah.
What a man. And there he had his, as you said, his own company, and the first thing the communists do is start taking over everything that they had no hand in building and taking it as their own. So uh, what did your father do to after you got sent to America? What was him and your mother doing to survive, to live in the regime?
I mean, my dad had a little bit of savings. Not that there were, most of that was confiscated also. But he had padded it enough that he could. I literally lived in a hotel for 18 months before getting out in Havana, because we had to leave the town we were in for obvious reasons. And I think that's more important is what my dad had to do and my mom had to do when they came to the United States. I mean, we were destitute. We didn't have a dime. As a matter of fact, my dad owed a cousin of ours $200, which back then was a chunk of change. And here's a man who was a middle class businessman with a 57 Pontiac, a deuce and a half, and a Jeep for work, and horses and cattle and all this kind of stuff. And now he's mowing lawns and loading trucks. And my mom worked in a sweatshop in Florida, South Florida, for well over 15 years. So the American dream is real, but you have to work your ass off.
Your book is, if anyone wants to know, see, and also see the results of the American dream and someone chasing down the American dream, this book absolutely is the best example I've yet to see of that. It's a wonderful book, just getting into your age of manhood, shall we say. And you mentioned, as you get to Miami, it's no walk in the park where you're living. You at the time, the drug scene is not quite developed to what Miami became known as, but I believe early on you're already having to pair yourself up in a gang per se, for protection, because the African Americans, the whites, of course, they're not going to look too kindly on the new Cuban boy coming to school, and you got to band up with somebody. Could you explain what that was like for you as a young guy coming up and learning your way like that?
I call those my wayward years. I had decent grades in school, but I was always getting in fights, and I did hang around with a rough crowd. And you mentioned it. I mean, again, you have three cultures clashing in a fast-growing town, because Miami, back in the early '60s, was a town. You couldn't call that. It was a small city at best, and this thing is exploding with growth. So yeah, I did hang out with a rough crowd. We did get into some substantial fights, but and drugs were just coming in. I mean, marijuana was a big deal when I was in high school. There were a lot of people were smoking pot, but in my case, that association with the tough guys kept me from the drugs, because I started martial arts when I was 15 years old and started lifting weights when I was like 16. And that was what we looked forward to: chasing girls and getting in fights, not smoking dope, not smoking, cigarettes or anything like that. It was all about building up your body and building up your fighting spirit and capabilities. So I think it's just part of the lifelong forging that God had plans for me. First, my childhood being fairly atypical, and then my teens being fairly atypical, or at least turbulent. and then going into the military, into the agency. All those things were, you know, fate, God, kind of forging my metal as I went along to become what I eventually had to become.
And did your mother and father did they get to South Florida? Was it 1962 or was it?
Yes, I came out real early 62 and they came out real late 62. And we lived in a one bedroom efficiency apartment that it was six of us because my two cousins and my aunt had also come out. So my dad was responsible for that, and my mom could work, but my aunt could because she, my cousin was five, and his sister was probably like 2 or 3 years old, so she couldn't leave him in the house. So yeah, they came up the hard way. But 3 years later, 3 or 4 years later, my dad bought his first house in Hialeah and started that American dream. But my dad worked two jobs for as long as I can remember, and my mom worked in a sweatshop for well over a decade. So
A excuse me. One very interesting part that kind of ties in something that you would have a lifelong passion for, as well as you mentioned your father working very hard. Um, I believe did he end up working at or for Chris Craft?
yeah, he that was my dad was. I think he had like a seventh grade education, but he was very smart with numbers. He was a very good businessman. That came from my grandmother, his mom. But because he didn't want to go to school, my grandmother put him in a trade school as an apprentice of carpentry. And my dad he was an artisan. My dad could build things that you could sell in any store, high end. And with the money that he made, mowing lawns and this, that, and the other, he bought himself a little tool set, screwdriver, hammer, blah, 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 and got a job in a boatyard. That boatyard actually burnt down. And shortly thereafter, he landed a job at Chris Craft. Yeah, working. Back then, wood was a big deal with boats. So he got that was the big first step up for him. He worked at Chris Craft for several years, and then there was a very wealthy man, Edgar Gabor. I'll never forget the guy's name. Uh, he had a yacht it was a PT boat that he had served on, and he bought it and had it refurbished, and started hiring my dad part time, and then eventually told my dad, quit your job, I'll pay you twice what you're making, and he did that 6-7 days a week for several years. Yeah.
And if anything, your father, reading this in the book just shows where you got your grit and your determination from. Reading that about your father, how hard he worked. I mean, he was working weekends as well. And the part I wanted to show folks because unless you're had a father or a grandfather that boated or was older, you may not know about Chris Craft. And they are some of the most beautiful. That's a terrible picture. I apologize. But guys, just Google Chris Craft, and these are some of the most beautiful, beautiful boats, in my opinion, ever made. There's a lot of them on the Great Lakes up north. Great seafaring boat or great boats. As a matter of fact, my father was wanting one, and sadly, he passed away before we could save. He could actually get one. But you mentioned the refurbished PT boats, and isn't this around the time that you began boxing, but also you ended up discovering scuba and diving?
Yeah, they're all kind of back to back. Like I said, I started the martial arts and that kind of stuff before my first year of high school. I was literally a freshman when I started martial arts. And that's when I started diving too. But my fever of diving was from way back as a kid. In Cuba, my mom's cousin was a curator for a seaquarium in Cienfuegos. And he gave me my first Mass Vincent snorkel when I was like 6. So I used to go on the beach, go to Valladolid, and I would, my dad get pissed off because I was going out too far or all this kind of stuff. But I always loved the water. That was my passion. So I literally used, in my freshman year, kids would skip school to smoke pot. I would skip school to go diving. So yeah, that's always been a passion of mine.
I, I sadly have not been diving or skydiving, and people keep telling me I need to do it, and it looks like so much fun and quite relaxing too. Even if you're not, doing military scuba diving, shall we say, it looks like a lot of fun, and I'm gonna try and remedy that. Um, what originally brought you, I guess, being from your time in Cuba and already diving and all of that? Could you tell when you got here and started diving more? Could you tell this was something that you were going to want to do the rest of your life? You enjoyed it that much early on?
As a matter of fact, again, my life was not planned by me. Every time I had Plan A, Plan B would be one of the materialized, but it was always the best one. I started college in Miami-Dade Junior College. I was going to be a marine science technician. I wanted to be a professional diver. One of my dreams was to be in Jacques Cousteau's Calypso boat, out there doing this stuff. And in one of my oceanography classes is where I met a pararescueman who was now in the reserves. And he's the one that recruited me into pararescue. And that, I had only been in this country about 8 years. I didn't know the difference between any of the services or what they did. Nobody in my family had ever worn a uniform. So that was a pretty quick indoctrination into, what our special operations forces are. And 6 months later, I was in the pipeline.
That's just amazing. And I believe one of the gentlemen, gosh, and I can't remember. It's a Greek name, I believe, Mr. Leo Thalassides.
Thalassides, yes.
That's Thalassides. He was your sensei in karate, was he not?
Yeah, Jim Alfano and Leo Thalassides had a martial arts school in Hialeah. Both were Hialeah cops. Jim was assassinated during the riots. A sniper took him out. Leo Thalassides passed away a couple of years ago, but he was the oldest serving law enforcement officer in Florida. He was still a law enforcement officer in his 80s. They couldn't get rid of him. He was an icon. Obviously, he wasn't on the street breaking up riots or anything like that, but I'm sure that he still could. Leo was a force of nature, to say the least. So, yeah. And both were, Leo was a World War II vet, fought in the Pacific, and Jim was a Marine recon for Raiders, I think they called them back then. And again,
yes,
now,
sir.
And he was in Vietnam. He was that was his thing. Yeah.
I mean, that's got to have a huge effect on you, especially having Marine Raiders as your karate instructors and your martial arts instructors. That I can only imagine the stories that those two men must have held. Because as we were speaking offline, I had just finished Ben's book, and boy, those early UDT and Scout swimmers were a tough breed of men. So I believe I remember you were when you first you kind of get in trouble with some fights as this will happen, and you mentioned the drugs starting to becoming more prevalent. And I believe you're even around as you're entering the service when I think maybe cocaine starts to show up. But how do you end up finding from your karate, your scuba, and your interactions with these WW2 vets? How do you find your way to the Air Force? Was the Air Force your first choice?
No, like I said, it was happenstance. This guy that was in my oceanography class, happened to be a pararescueman, and it was about the time that I was, getting a conscience as an adult, trying to grow up. And there was couple of things that happened that made me realize the debt that my family owed this country, and the debt that I could try to pay back. So part of my deal going in pararescue, I wanted to go to Vietnam. That was the only reason. My draft number was so high, I would have never been called. And I will tell you, when I came home and told my parents, actually, I came home and didn't say anything to my parents until like 30 days before I left. And they were very, very angry at me. And at the time, I took it as, yeah, all parents do that. Now that I'm a parent and I look back, I go, they lost me once at the age of 10, and now I'm about to lose them again at the age of 20, because I went into the military when I was 20 years old. I turned 21 about 6 months into the pararescue pipeline. So, I had no inkling other than I was interested in adventure. I was interested, and it was such a sweet pitch. I mean, he takes me to his house. Glenn Richardson is his name. And he starts showing me photographs of him going through jump school. I'm going, wow, that's pretty cool. Scuba school. I said, I'm already a certified diver, but that's pretty cool too. And back then we used to go through Navy underwater swimmer school for pararescue, which are all SEALs instructors. And, they teach you how to shoot out of an airplane, they teach you jump out of this, jump out of that. And you get a cool uniform with a cool beret. I went like, and I'm going to get paid for this. So yeah, it was an easy sell.
I believe I wanted to show this because folks are always curious about the photos, but this is a great veterans tribute site of a young Rick Prado. Apologize for the time, but check that young guy out.
That was the first time I came home with my beret.
Wow, I was just wondering, but the background in the photo, it looked. I was going to say, are you at home? Wow.
Yeah.
Man, oh man, that's amazing. Could you? We're not very familiar with Air Force. Could you explain the wings and the badges here for us?
Yeah, the first set of wings are crew member wings, and actually mine eventually had the star and the wreath around it because I was master. The next ones, of course, are the parachute wings, and for pararescue, it was easy to become a jump master and get your full wreath on there because we did 2-man operations, so you didn't have 47 guys and 5 in charge. It was you and your teammate, and you both had to be able to know how to spot and assess how you were going to go and do a jump. The bottom of the badges is they call it the little blind man. That's the scuba badge. It's been updated recently especially for the Air Force. But that's for the people that went to scuba school, and like I said, it was military school. It was a Navy underwater swimmer school out of Key West. So, and the rest are just good service ribbon and blah blah blah, that kind of stuff.
Wow, that definitely going to have some questions about that as we go on here. It's a wonderful photo of you there. Let's see, and so where are we now at time wise? Is this 71-ish, 72 time frame?
I went into pararescue in late 71. I was 20 years old, and I got out. I went into the full reserves in 74 because by then I realized I was not going to go to Vietnam. So I rode rescue for Miami Metro for 6 years, and because as pararescuemen, people that don't know what pararescue does, I mean, pararescue is a combat medic who their job is to go in harm's way to extricate either a downed pilot or a team that has been busted up and they're out there by themselves. Pararescue is the one that would go in and extricate these individuals. So we were high-end medics. We were EMT2s when we got out of our pipeline. But We could jump out of airplanes. We could do scuba dive in. We could do mountain climbing. We could do all that stuff. But those were just methodology for implementing our rescue skills. And again, most of the time when we were out rescuing somebody, they're not in the best of shape, so you had to fix them up.
One of that's a very, very interesting chat or portion of the book. That is the chapter as your excuse me again, guys. I'm sorry. About you working through the pipeline and your Air Force section, but specifically you going out when you were an EMT, and some of those calls you got were just unbelievable. I remember one offhand. I can't remember if there was a shooting, but the one that just always grabs my attention was the time you came across the man on PCP that was just slinging officers. And could you talk a little bit about some of your experiences as an EMT in Miami at that time?
Yeah, it's funny. Some of my best memories and some of my worst memories are from those 6 years, because that one about the PCP was this, guy was maybe 5'10", 150, 160 pounds, but he was on PCP, was the angel dust, I think is what they called it. Mm-hmm. And when me and Frank was my rescue teammate, when we came into the scene, he literally had one cop on each hand, and he was flinging them around like if they were, dolls. It's the scariest thing you've ever seen. He had shot his girlfriend. The round had gone through underneath her breast and come out the back, collapsing the lung. But we couldn't work on her until this was neutralized. That's part of the protocol. So I looked to Frank, and Frank was a big guy. Frank was a good 6 foot something. And I said, I'm going low, you going high? Boom. We knocked him on his ass. And it took all 4 of us for the cops to be able to handcuff him. And he was literally trying to bite us. And it was foaming at the mouth kind of stuff. We saved the girl, and that's one of the good stories. I think the saddest 2 stories that I still unfortunately remember a little too well is the first time I saw the lights go out on somebody. There was this young guy, he was probably about 18 or 19, working on a construction site, and one of the columns fell and pinned him against the surface. And I got there. I was, again, first man on the point, and I started talking to him, and he was barely conscious, and I literally saw the lights go out of his eyes. And to make matters worse, his father was working with him there. His father was just a few yards away. The second one, which was a little bit more on the adventure side, was there's a little boy, about 9 years old, that he knew how to swim, but he went and got some orange juice. He was walking at the edge of the pool, and he slipped and hit his head. And when his mom saw him floating, she called 911 or whatever, and we happened to be fairly nearby, so we were there pretty quick. We were actually on the road. The rescue truck was actually, we were at the station, and when she had pulled the boy out of the water, we started doing CPR on him. Back then, CPR included breathing. Now it's just compressions. So my partner who had him on his knees, giving him chest compressions, I'm on my knees at the ambulance, giving him mouth to mouth, and the mother is riding shotgun on the way to the hospital. And the kid vomited in my mouth 3 times. And 3 times I would turn to the side, spit it out, and keep giving him mouth to mouth. And I recall his mom looking at me. Her eyes looked like saucers. She couldn't believe that this was going on. And we got to the hospital, and the doctor says, he's nice and pink. We got it from here. And we had just put him on the gurney. And as soon as the doctor said that, my adrenaline dropped. And as sad as the story is, there was a cute part. The nurse says to me, says, "Are you okay?" And I went, "No." And she gave me smelling salts and stuff, because all of a sudden, I looked down, my pants are ripped. I'm on my knees are bleeding, and I have nothing but orange juice vomit all over my shirt. We got back to the station, wrote it up and all this kind of stuff. And a couple hours later, I called the hospital, and they told me the kid didn't make it because he had been brain dead for too long. His brain would take up the functions again. And I just went to my chief and I said, I got to go home. I'm taking leave. I just didn't want to be there at that time. So yeah, those were again. There was a lot of times, a lot of great stories of where we saved people, and that was the reason that I went in that direction, was because in pararescue, yes, I was diving once a week. I was jumping out of airplanes once a week. I could go to the range and shoot anytime I wanted to, PT and everything else, but I wasn't making a difference. It was all training for training's sake, which, as you know, post-Vietnam, that was the trend for quite a few years. And so that's why I ended up going into the rescue. There was again, the Prado luck. There was the captain for Miami-Dade Rescue was a PJ. And we were in the same unit. He's the one that recruited me into the fire department, Jim Wilson.
I mean, and as you said, I can only imagine as heartbreaking as that is, the work you did to keep him alive and bring him back. I can only imagine how the mother being in shock, not knowing what to do, and have y'all step in and do what y'all do and keep that child alive. That just speaks volumes to you as a man, as a medical practicer. It's a very moving story, and at that time in Miami, I could only imagine. I can only imagine what the buildup of the gang warfare, the drugs that have hit, the growing, as you said, Miami would go through in that period of time. What you were seeing on a daily basis.
Well, there were actually a couple of Vietnam vets in the rescue business over there, and they used to tell me, he says, we're seeing more stuff here than we saw overseas, because it was the drug years, the gang wars now were, Colombians versus Cubans and Venezuelans, all this kind of crap, automatic weapons, shootings in malls, and then, of course, the drug-related incidents of people being under the influence and getting into massive accidents and stuff like that. It was a very, very intense 6 years on riding rescue in Miami. Plus, there weren't too many of us. Riding rescue. So
I can't imagine what that was like, because I mean, this is for those of y'all that follow any organized crime or whatever, this is the Griselda Blancos, the George Youngs, and the Pablos, and the Cocaine Cowboy movie guys. All of them are in the town Mr. Rick is working in, and trying to save people that they have either sold drugs to or outright killing. So I can only imagine how much that period of time helped you on down the line in situations you'd face down the line, because that had to be just utter chaos, to be quite frank with you. Wow, gosh almighty. I mean, we haven't even gotten into the military, and it's just so when you go through, or I should say, after you finish up with your stint as a EMT, what's next in line? What are you? Have you met Miss Carmen yet? Have you?
Carmen came in a little later in life. So in a nutshell, what happened was I was riding rescue, and like I said, I felt good because I know that I was making a difference. But I always had this itch for going overseas and fighting in a different level, not just saving people, which is a very commendable thing to do, because I have nothing but respect for our first responders. But I also had this adventurous spirit. I had read every James Bond novel, watched Sea Hunt, all this stuff from my childhood, kind of self-programmed into wanting to do more. So in 79 or so, I applied to the agency, and they brought me on contract as a combat medic for Special Activities Division, which is the CIA's Special Operations Forces. They all come from our Special Operations Forces community, what now they call SOCOM. We didn't have SOCOM back then. So I was working contract with the agency. I would take 2 weeks off of fire department, go over there, help with a training mission or whatever. And Reagan came in. And when Reagan came in, first thing he did was declare war on communism in Latin America. He called it his backyard. And the agency, that's what he ordered the agency to create a program to support the Nicaraguan counter-revolutionaries that were fighting the communist-backed Sandinista regime in Nicaragua. And very early on, they called me up and they go, would you be interested in a full-time job? And I said, of course. And they said, you want to know what it is? I said, I don't care. If it's a full-time job in ops, that's what I want to do. And 4 or 5 days later, I was in DC. Couple of 2-3 weeks later, I was already in the jungles of Nicaragua and the Honduran border there. I did that for 3 years. For the first 14 months of that program, I was the only agency officer allowed in the camps. Why? Because it was Black Ops. The title of the book is Black Ops because that is operations that are directed by the President of the United States that the American hand has to be hidden. So I was there as a Honduran major. Hondurans were extremely great supporters of the program. And I did that for 3 years. From Monday through Friday for 3 years, I slept in the jungle hammock. So best job I ever had.
There, you've got some great. I'll be showing them in just a moment of you actually in the jungle. But you being a South American Cuban and being somewhat familiar with your location, where you're going to go, what was your preparation, your training? What was given to you, said to you, or did you go through, or were you literally put on the plane and boom, you're in the jungle?
It was the latter. All I had, not all I had, I had substantial paramilitary experience because Pararescue is an elite unit. I was fit, I was willing, and I could pass as a non-gringo. I could actually, I remember that one time there was a newspaper reporter at the military airport, and he approached me, started saying, Major, can I talk to you about something? And he was speaking English, and my English was terrible. I mean, I broke my English down to sound like I was some, third grader, and everybody around that knew who I was were laughing because they knew that I was fluent in English and that I was a gringo. The guy never figured out that I wasn't a Honduran. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun. But the agency did not provide any previous training. Now, what I did get was on-the-job training. For example, when we got things like our 50 cals, we needed to teach them headspace and timing. I had never done that. I got really good at firing RPGs, which I had never done before. And it got to, we had 10 camps, and I had to teach every single one of those camps how to shoot the damn thing and actually help them utilize it in hairier circumstances. So I got pretty good at shooting that RPG. At 100 meters, I wouldn't miss, I'll tell you that.
Ooh, man, you did get good. Wow. And it does mention the Santa supplied RPGs, sniper rifles, and the 50 cal heavy machine guns, courtesy of the U.S. Mr. Rick was the only CIA officer, as he mentioned, in 10 Contra camps he worked with for the first 14 months of the program, with a total of 36 months in the jungle. He became Captain Alex of the Honduran Army, trusted ally of the Contras. So how did when you get there, you mentioned you're literally in the jungle. Where does your cover come from? Captain Alex, is that just the name that the agency comes with and they build you a legend, so to speak, or?
No, I think it was it was robust because the Hondurans were the ones providing the actual cover. The Hondurans thought that my real name was Alex Mendez. And so when I came into town, the agreement had already been made that since I was that was going to be involved in the camps, that I needed to have a cover for action, and that they gave me identification that identified me first as a captain. Then I got promoted to major, and it was Air Force intelligence that was represented there. So the camps, going to the camps, the first 8 months at least, it was always by truck. We would spend days just driving through the jungle and rivers and everything else, because all these places were in very remote areas, in very forested or jungled areas. About a year into the program, we procured helicopters, and then I started flying to a lot of the places rather than driving. It was safer, although we did get shot at a couple of times in the helicopters, because you're in an area where there's it's not like here, it says you're entering Florida. There's no borders there, and the Sandinistas are all over the place too. So, but it was very visceral for me, because as a kid, seeing what happened to my country, my first country, and I couldn't do a damn thing about it. Now I am the guy facilitating and helping the Contras fight the very same monster. And as you know from the book, there's a couple of special operations that I pulled, including a scuba operation. I trained some mosquitoes, and we blew up Puerto Cabezas Pier, which was the logistic belly button for the Sandinistas from Soviet provided material via Cuba. So it was one of these things that there wasn't a day that I didn't pitch myself, because I was definitely making a difference. And most importantly, I was working with people that were so pure in their intentions. There were no politics. I would sit around the fire every night with a different group, and I used to go to 2 camps per week, and sit around the campfire, and I would ask them, why are you here? And there wasn't a single person that said, well, I read Marx and Lenin, and I don't agree with that philosophy. It was all personal. It was, they raped my daughter. It was, they beat up my priest and burnt my church. They confiscated my cattle. They forced recruited my 15-year-old into the military. Every single person there, and some were very young, late teens, were all there for a very specific reason. And that's a purity that you don't get to see too often in life, especially when any government related kind of thing. So it was a blessing. Like I said, I had a great, incredible career, and I pinched myself. But when I asked, those 3 years were my favorite, and I think that's where I had the most fun too.
It's and you mentioned how much we'll speak about that operation, because it's a very interesting part of your story down there. But the camaraderie that you ended up building with some of these men, and your face being known, both good and bad. Could you I don't want to give all the stories away in the book, because there's so many good ones, but I mean, heck, you just being nice to a random person you crossed one day in a camp actually saved your life from an assassination attempt.
Yeah, what happened was this was one of my favorite camps. The original commander Suicida was a very, very dear friend of mine. He was assassinated, and when he was no longer in the camp started turning rogue. The guys that took over were more crooks than anything else. That power corrupts, and these guys had guns, but even before that, the story that you're talking about, this 18-year-old kid comes up to me and says, Major, my wife is sick, and I don't have enough money to get her the medicines from town. So I went into my pocket. I gave him the equivalent of maybe $20, and he thanked me profusely. So when the camp really went rogue, and they were in the hands of 2 very bad dudes, I was asked to go and bring him out, correct the problem. And I went in. The first guy that I met was Krill, and Krill came out with his bodyguard, and of course we landed the helicopter quarter of a mile from the camp, and I sent his bodyguard to go get some cokes at the local town, and when he did, I threw him in the aircraft, disarm him, threw him in the aircraft, and then send him home. So helicopter takes off. I'm there with two other Nicaraguan officers from the Contras, and the command, the bodyguard comes back. It wasn't long before everybody in the camp knew that Krill had been abducted. So I'm walking through the town, and usually they would place us in the middle of the camp because that's the safest area, obviously. And I'm walking around, and from the back of a bush was this young man. And he goes, "Psst, psst, Major, Major." And he told me, he says, "They're going to try to kill you tonight." And I went, "Really?" He goes, "Yep, they're going to try to kill you tonight. They're talking about it." So first hit was they did not put me in the center of town. They put me in the edge of the camp. And it was a house, it was a ramshackle house. That's all those dirt floor stuff, but they were all the same. But not in the center. But that was a blessing, because what happened was, as soon as it turned dark, me and the two other Contras, jumped out of the window and went up into the hill behind it and hunker down. I mean, you're not going to walk out of that jungle by yourself. So it was a matter of, holding ground or whatever. We established a perimeter. We had all the grenades and stuff laid out. And around midnight, you see these guys breaking into the house with flashlights and all the noise going on because we're not there and all this stuff. And the next morning, I just went back in just like if nothing had happened. Sat down in the chow hall, and some people are going like, "What is he doing here?" And the other ones were laughing because there was, this was a very small minority that was doing the wrong. They just happened to be senior enough, and they were mean people. These guys were hoods. And subsequently, the next day, or that second day, I met Cara de Malo was the other one, and he was in town drinking at a whorehouse in the morning, and I called him out, and like the old line from The Godfather, I made him an offer he couldn't refuse. So I got him on the plane too, and both were court-martialed and dealt with.
Yeah,
By the Contra fire instructor there.
Yeah, that is a very hair raising. I mean, especially when you mentioned y'all left where y'all were supposed to spend the night, and sure enough, you see them coming in the house, flashlights, and I can only imagine, oh no, he's not here. Surely he found out. And I mean, I didn't even think to ask you, as you being the only American coming in and having a bodyguard of sorts, what were you carrying into the camp? I know you had a Browning high power, if I'm not mistaken, but did you carry a Car 15 or a?
Yeah, I had a Car 15. Eventually, I got a Car 15. When I first got there, everything was starting up. We didn't have the right weapons, so I picked up an AK from the Contras. But shortly thereafter, I got my AR-15. I had my Browning high power. And I always carried 2 mini grenades in my pocket. That was part of the get up. And yeah, I unfortunately got to use it a couple of times. So
I wanted to show, when you were talking about, I've got some other training photos, but guys, this is the territory, the land he's talking about, how thick, and you're not walking out of the jungle by yourself at night. So you can see clearly what he means by that. And do you happen to remember where y'all were at during this picture?
One of the camps, I can't remember which camp, but I know that it was very, very close to the border with Nicaragua, or on the border, because that was one of the camps that we were attacked as soon as we got there. Later on, not at this time, another time when we got up there, we Sandinistas started shooting at us from across the maybe 150 yards of that. But yeah, this was just typical. This was, Monday through Friday. That was pretty much it. Either walking or riding a horse into the sunset.
You're in John Wayne in full effect right there. How and speaking of, did you have, well, you grew up with a horse. You had a horse before you had a car. So you were always comfortable on horseback.
Yeah, I still ride actually. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
great. Wow. That's amazing. And I've got some more good some of your photos from your website that I'll pull up. But speaking of one more part from the book for this section, and we won't give any more away because there's a lot of good stuff in this. But speaking about the gosh, the mosquitoes, your divers, and I believe if I'm quoting correctly in the right one of the mosquito fighters noticed you and Stedman Fagoth visiting and noticed a scuba badge on my hat. Speaking for Mr. Rick, he mentioned that some of the men were lobster divers, and I took great interest in this and went out of my way to meet them, and noticed they were expert divers. Could you speak a little bit about that and how you developed that dive team? And I believe a SEAL helped you out, a Big Hal, or was Big Hal around at this point in
Yeah,
time?
that was later on. Hal was a former SEAL, but he was he came in later in the game. But no, what happened was that I was at one of the mosquito camps. They're the Native Americans. They live in the east side of Nicaragua and a little bit on the Honduran side. And I had my scuba badge somewhere on my hat or my uniform. And one of them came up to me and asked me, I said, "Are you a military diver? Are you a diver?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a military diver." And he says, "Well, we're lobster divers." So they were not expert in scuba. They were just very comfortable in the water. And I made a note of it. I said, "Well, that's really interesting. That's a hell of a good resource." And being a scuba guy, an avid scuba guy for decades, I kind of filed it in the back of my mind. Shortly thereafter, CIA headquarters came in with a request that we needed to come up with a special operation. The Sandinistas were starting to feel the pain of the raids and ambushes and scrimmages that the Contras were confronting them with. But they wanted, as they called it, they wanted a left hook. They wanted something that sent a message to them that, hey, this isn't a bunch of ragtag, campesinos, fighting you. There's more to it than that. And that's what I proposed, and it was accepted that I would train those guys. There were 6 of them. 4 made it through my selection. Then I spent weeks, teaching them how to counter kicks and do compass swims with an attack board and all this real sexy stuff that they knew nothing about. And then when we got the device, practicing how to tying the device under the pier, where all the logistics came from Cuba, military logistics that came from Cuba came through that Puerto Cabezas. And we went out. This thing was 80 pounds of C4 in a torpedo-looking thing that you could swim. And we got in the water, got everything turned on, and the 2 of the guys went in and they put the device under the pier, and it worked. We did it late at night. We didn't want anybody to get hurt. We just wanted to negate their ability to resupply that well, and it was quite a scandal, but it was good. It was very satisfactory. It was the first time I saw overhead. I had never seen satellite overhead. A couple of 2-3 days later, the chief of station comes up and he goes, "Here's your guys' work." You see this big hole in the pier. It was pretty cool.
That is, and it reads, guys. If y'all don't have the book, you've got to get it because they do. I mean, it's like a Vietnam or a early UDT SEAL mission. They go in, lay explosive, and as you just heard, they blow the ever loving bejesus out of this. And I believe that's the one where, I mean, I think y'all shut the pipeline down for, was it a week or two, or
Probably more for them to reconstruct that. Yeah, yeah. And that was important, but the real importance was they made them look vulnerable, and it was good for recruitment. Politically, also, is the fact that they started going like, "Uh-oh, this is a little bit more serious than just a band of freedom fighters out there." So
we've got effectively they've got SEAL teams that can encroach on us that we had no idea that they could do. I mean, that had to be pretty eye-opening for them. And if I believe I've got a pic, yes, I do. Let me pull up a photo of your famous divers, your band of pirates, shall we say?
yeah, I named the team the Barracudas. And,
Barracudas.
yeah, that's those are the four. Mosquito, this was a Honduran diver that was helping me with the training.
Wow. And I mean, from it sounds like they didn't have any issues. Did early on? Did you notice any with them adapting equipment they've never used? Was there any struggle or anything?
No, you had guys who were very comfortable in the water, and look, the main thing is they believed in what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
They were there fighting. They weren't there on vacation. They weren't there running away from their parents. They're there fighting. They were guerrillas. They just that now they had this expertise, and of course they stood above everybody else. After that, everybody knew that they had been the ones that had been trained and actually carried out the mission.
That's I know you had to feel real good about that being such a success as it was, because that was quite the coup you pulled off there. We've got some good questions coming in here. Let me see one. We just mentioned, how long did it take to rebuild the bridge, or was there ever a follow up? And evidently, it took a while in the book. I know it's over a few weeks, and Mr. Rick said probably longer, to be quite honest.
And like I said, the impact of the mission was twofold. One was to negate them the supplies, but we knew that was a temporary thing. They eventually would be able to fix it. But like I said, the most important thing of that operation was the fact that they showed them that we had capabilities they had no idea we had. So
can actually reach out and touch y'all.
That's correct.
Scott, who is the son of Richard Moose Gross of MACV-SOG and the unit fame, he was curious. Lots of Cuban advisors. Did you ever come across any Cubans in the jungle?
Yeah, there was one of the pilots that we had. Gonzalo was Bay of Pigs veteran. As a matter of fact, he was my flight instructor when we were flying the helicopters. He was actually logging my hours. And he was, like I said, he was a patriot. There's another guy named Felix. What's his book? I'm having a senior moment here. Felix Hernandez. He was a Bay of Pigs guy. Went to Vietnam for the agency. Well, for the military. And he is the guy actually that he eventually got Che Guevara in Bolivia.
Oh, Mr. Felix Rodriguez. Yeah. Oh, yes. Wow. And funny enough, you mentioned his Vietnam work. We've had a guest on, Colonel Andy Finlinson, who worked with the PRU organization. The man who replaced him when he was going home was Mr. Felix. So he said he was quite the guy and had some just amazing stories of his time down there hunting Che.
Legendary. He's got a book called Shadow Warriors that I also recommend. He's a very dear friend of mine. He's getting up in age. He's in his early 80s, but he's a pretty tough cookie. He's the president of the Bay of Pigs Museum in Miami. So.
What a man. I knew he had a book coming. I didn't know if it was out or not, but I will be getting that book because what a career that man has led. We've got a few more considering we're on the jungle. Galil was curious at the time you were running around the jungle. How common did you encounter the Galil rifle platform? I know they were popular down there during that period of time.
I never ran into one. I know that they were somewhere available because the Israelis were supporting some of the stuff for the Contras. Since we wanted, we didn't want to give them M16s because I was too American. I was the only guy with an AR-15, and so we gave them FALs. Is many would have had 308 caliber FALs, and they loved them because I mean they had this thunderous roar every time they shot at something. But that was the primary issued weapon for them was the FAL.
And there's a lot of good photos of some of the SEAL team guys coming up with some fouls down in Vietnam. Rudy Bosch, the famous SEAL. There's a great photo of him with his out there running in the jungle. Jake B is curious if you knew of a Steve Bennett. He was with the CIA Project 404 in Savannah Ket a bit before his time, but I'm curious if you ever crossed paths.
No, I never had the honor. I've heard the name, but I never had the honor. It is before my time.
Excellent. We've got a few guests that we have in the community that are either SOG family members or pilot family members. So we may get surprised and have someone on here that may know you or someone you cross paths with. Jump training. What were you guys jumping out of for the Air Force and any other of your military training? Did you by chance jump out of an OV-10 Bronco at a time?
No, the oldest plane I jumped out of was the Albatross. And I don't remember the nomenclature of it right now, but it was the Albatross. And that's because it was able to land in the water. It actually had jet assist, and we could that and some old sub-chaser helicopters is what we first had. Shortly after I got in, we got the Hueys and the H-53s. H-53s were already in Vietnam and everything else, but we started getting them into the U.S.-based units. So we had C-130s and Hueys. We graduated to that. But first it was Albatross and these S-17s or something, World War II sub-chaser helicopters were pretty rustic.
Wow. And you were mentioning one last question before we continue on. You had mentioned the missions that were going on after Vietnam with the PJs, and we actually had a prior SOG PJ vet on. I believe I asked you about him, and he was explaining just the wild rescue missions of boats out on the ocean capsizing, their injuries. He went over a few that were just utter nightmares in the seas, trying to get boat captains off the boat that was sinking and such as that. Jason was curious if you ever crossed paths with the Wild Carrot during your PJ work, and I think you said you don't remember hearing or crossing paths. I think y'all had just missed each other. Okay, so now we are I believe, let's see here, you're getting close, considering we're not going to cover everything in the book, guys. Y'all are going to have to get this book. I believe around, is it 1983 or 84 that you finally get word from, is it Mr. Dewey Claridge or Bill Casey saying that it's time to come home?
Yeah, after 3 years there, like everything else, that was a danger post. My first son was born during that time, and it was just time to come out. We don't do, even in Vietnam, people didn't do 3-year assignments. So it was time for me not only to get out because now they had other. By then, the fig leaf had dropped. Everybody knew the United States was in there. So we started getting a lot of our special activity divisions, ground branch guys going out there. Hal, as you mentioned, the SEAL, he was with OTS SAD, but he was an early guy up there for once we started getting, and we had a lot of Green Berets that spoke Spanish, that were Hispanic, that were helping us in the camps and stuff like that. But so yeah, it was real early '84. They pulled me out. I came back, had a few more courses to take and finish. I got my degree and then went through spy school. Spy school, I think it was in '86, early '86. That was a fairly long training session. You're talking about 5 months at a black site, which is one of the least secret, and they call it the farm. Everybody knows where it's at if you Google it. But anyway, um, and I was lucky. I was one of the lucky ones because I didn't have to go through the paramilitary training. A lot of the young kids who came straight out of college, that pipeline was almost a year because they had to learn another language. I already had one, English, and they had to learn paramilitary skills because we are a paramilitary organization. So, and like I said, I have had 6 overseas tours. For one of them is only one of them unaccompanied. That was my last tour. I went from there to my first counterterrorism mission deployment in a South American country. I was there for 2 years. Recruited a terrorist, took down a terrorist cell on another occasion. That was a pretty kinetic place and a lot going on. I'm not allowed to mention the name of the town, but most people that know a little bit about history do the math. Is pretty easy on that. We were fighting a Maoist insurgency in Central America, in South America in the 1980s. So that was an easy. I'm not allowed to say, but anyway. From there, I went to the Philippines. I was chief of liaison there. Did about 2 years there. Again, another very kinetic place. You have Colonel Nick Rowe, legendary Vietnam, just one of the most legendary guys out there, up there with Billy Waugh and a couple of others. And he was assassinated in Manila about 10 months before I got there. And even when I first got there, they killed 2 airmen at Angeles City, which was where Clark Air Force Base was at. So the NPA, the New People's Army, were literally in Manila, and that's where they ambushed and assassinated Nick Rowe.
And it was that that group was known as the Sparrows. Is that correct?
Yeah, their hitman, the New People's Army was again another communist-backed guerrilla force. The second one was Abu Sayyaf, that was down in Mindanao, and that is primarily a radical Muslim. But within the NPA, being the New People's Army, they had created a group of guys that called Sparrows, and they were assassins. These guys, that's all they trained to do. They were cold-blooded murderers. They would their modus operandi. As a matter of fact, if you could Google NPA Sparrows, and there's a demonstration of a guy that was captured and cut a deal by showing how they did this. And what they would do is they would take a 1911 A1 45 caliber pistol, tape the grip handle down, round in the chamber, and they would carry it in their crotch. And they would hold it up with their left hand. So all they had to do was push up, grab the gun, come out and shoot. And they were lightning fast. And like I said, I recommend you guys look up that video because it is out there. And it's incredible how fast they can draw and put 2 rounds on somebody and walk off. And they were ghosts. People were scared of them because nobody ever saw them. And in a firefight, the first thing you're going to notice is who goes down. And then you may look to see, who did the shooting. By that time, they were gone. They were really ghosts. Yeah.
That I'm gonna have to find that YouTube video, and I'll get that up, guys. If y'all don't find it, I'll get that up in the next few days. I had no idea Oh, here we are. I've got the link right here. You graciously put it on page 194, the exact clip. I'll scan that and get that out. That's amazing. I had no idea about that.
That's an eye opener. Really is.
I can assume I'm going to be very, very shocked. I mean, geez, and if you don't know about Nick Rowe as well, legendary SF man, he escaped captivity. If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Rick Mike can correct me, but I think he developed the SEER program for the military. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, Nick actually killed the guard, escaped from a prisoner POW camp after 5 years. And because of his experiences in the POW camp, when they instituted, I think it was part of his idea, was to train. And it's one of the toughest schools that we go through is SEER. So, yeah.
There's a great 4-part interview as well, guys. I'll put up that they just released on one of the SOCOM or one of the websites where Colonel Rowe is speaking about his career, but most importantly, what got him through his POW. And he attributes most of it to his faith in Christ. Christ got him through his time. Just a wonderful man. Okay, and another part though with the Sparrow faction and the is it the the APAA or
NPA, New People.
yeah, New People's Army? Is this around the time to when you, Miss Carmen, and your acquaintance Dave, I believe y'all had assassins coming after y'all at a point, and y'all had to get ready, or thought y'all were going to have to get ready for a siege, so to speak?
Well, there were two incidents while we were down there, and both times I was with Davis. Davis was a little senior to me, Vietnam vet. Unfortunately, we lost him to cancer last year. He was a very dear friend of mine. And then the first one, we were actually in, I think, either Cebu or Davao. And we had gone after work. We were working there with the Filipino Green Berets or Special Forces. And we came out of a bar, because that's where you could go get some food and a couple of beers. And there was 6 of us. There was 2 Filipino officers, both captains. There were 2 techs, our technical guys who were doing a lot of signal intercept missions out there, and myself and Davis. And when we walked out, Davis was 5th, I was 6th, coming out of the club, the bar, and there were 3 guys standing in a circle like this. And as soon as we came out, they lined up 3 in a row. The guy in the middle made eye contact with us. The guys outside both had their left hands in their pocket, and they were making eye contact. Immediately, it's tunnel vision. All I could see was these guys. So I drew my weapon. Davis drew his weapon. The other 4 people never even saw them. Now, if you're walking down the street and somebody pulls up a big, stainless 1911 A1 and puts it 10 yards from you and points you to it, there's a reaction. These guys were nonplussed. The one in the middle just kept looking at us like, okay, we'll get you next time. And they kept walking by with the left hand in their hand, and we're following them around. And yeah, that was an eye opener. And I would tell you, I've used that a lot in the training that I do for our special military, because it proves that awareness beats fast draw every single time. Those guys were so fast, as you will see from that video, that if I would have only noticed it when the gun was out, I wouldn't be talking to you now.
That's a perfect point to bring up. Your I'm forgetting the term you use, but your color system for awareness. Could you explain how you came about that for yourself, and the different the different colors and their meanings for us?
Yeah, it's actually Colonel Cooper, who was a Marine, Vietnam vet, I believe, too. Colonel Cooper came up with and they're called the Cooper colors. And his theory was that, again, awareness beats fast draw all the time. It says, the 3 colors are white, yellow, orange, and red. He said you should only be in white when you're in bed with your wife. Otherwise, you should live in yellow. And yellow is just being aware. Hey, gee, there's a car there. Oh my God, this light is over here. Gee, that car pulled off behind me. Just being aware of what's going on. Orange is when you see something untoward. All of a sudden, you see there's a car 50 yards down. It's got the hood and the trunk of the car up. There's two guys around the car. And that's when he would teach you to make your plan. This is when you make your decision. If this is this, I am going to hit it with my car. I'm going to do a reverse 180, or I'm going to bail out and start shooting at them. Whatever decision you make, and hope that you don't have to implement, because nobody likes getting shot at. You make that in orange. Because when you go to red, when that guy actually pulls an AK out of that trunk of the car, if you don't have a plan by then, chances are you're not going to make it. You're not going to be able to get off the X, as we call it. So those were the Cooper colors. And, my kids knew about it since they were little. They were taught, that awareness. And it's funny because even when they were little, we would go to a restaurant and they knew where Dad was going to sit. They always knew where Dad was going to sit. No, that's Dad's seat. So yeah.
That's that's one of the best things I've heard for alert stages, and that you can be at white when you're at home surrounded by family in bed, but everything else you better be on yellow and going accordingly. And you're seeing that today. I won't go off on a tangent, but literally to go out shopping, you better be on your P's and Q's and be wired-tight. I mean, it's a sad state, but and as you mentioned earlier, when you first got back home, you went to college, you got your degree, and it seemed like the big chiefs, so to speak, had already had seen what they needed to see, and had you pegged for climbing the ladder. What was next in your list? Because I know eventually Korea comes up, but what's next in line after that?
Yeah, I think that the compliment that I was paid by my mentors like Dewey Claridge and Colonel Ray and all these guys was that they saw something in me that I hadn't seen in myself. And I think the first quantum leap for me was I was the head of the Palestinian branch in the Counterterrorist Center. I was only there a few months when they called me in and they asked me to start the Bin Laden Task Force with a guy named Mike Scheuer. Mike Scheuer was an analyst, and I was the senior ops officer. So I'm a plank owner, and we had I think 8 analysts in the team, and another case officer, a Arab American, spoke very very good Arabic, and that was quantum, because now we started digging into Bin Laden, finding out who he was, and coming up with really sound proposals for taking him down, which were always ignored, not so much by our building at the time, but definitely by the administration. And I mean, it's imagine if we would have been allowed, because able we were, if we'd been allowed to neutralize Bin Laden in 1997, let's say, it'd be like shooting Hitler in the 1930s. You would have changed the world. You really would have changed the way the world has turned out. So that was the first big job that now I'm the deputy chief of station for the Bin Laden Task Force, and got my GS-15 out of that, and that put me on an operational path. I was never a coffee boy. I was always an operations guy. I got my promotions out on the street.
Wow. Oh man, who was and Mr. Kofor Black. Where did you first cross paths with Mr. Kofor Black to where y'all developed y'all's friendship that would carry on? I think until till today. I can imagine.
Kofor is one of my biggest heroes and one of the best bosses ever. I had not met Kofor. I knew who he was because he was deputy chief of Africa Division, and then he actually no deputy chief of Latin America Division. He was an Africa hand, but he was sent to the division for Latin America, and then subsequently he became the director of the Counterterrorist Center, which Dewey Claridge started in back in 1986. Visionary guy also, but Kofor was. I think God puts people in the right place at the right time. He was the right guy to be in charge of CTC, the Counterterrorist Center, when 9/11 happened. He'd been there a little over a year before, and Hank Crumpton was his chief of operations early on, another very dear friend of mine. And when Hank wanted a replacement, was leaving, and they needed to replace him, they started asking around, and my name kept popping up from some of the group chiefs and branch chiefs. And that's the first time I met Kofor, was in 2000. Yeah, we hit it off right away. I took a very serious assignment for him, going to a radical Muslim country as chief of station. This was in 2000. And but with the understanding that when I came back in 2001, that I would be taking over for Hank as the chief of operations. So that was my initial meeting with Kofor. We became really good friends. He was a very big supporter of all my programs, most of which I can't talk about. But I paid him back. When I retired, I went to Blackwater. I was one of their vice presidents, and I recruited Kofor into Blackwater. So he did a good 6 years there also, and we got to work very close together.
Wow, that from all accounts, about reading about him and hearing other vets speak about him, he sounded like he is just a outstanding man, but just a hardcore patriot and lover of this country. I mean, and going back to talking about Bin Laden, I know we're kind of going forward here, but if only y'all could have had the chance when Mr. Billy was over there taking pictures to get Bin Laden out of I mean, like you said, it would have been literally history, life altering. I mean, gosh. So when you begin, Mr. Hank, by the way, guys, if you're not familiar with Mr. Hank, he is another individual I recommend Googling and looking at his history. Just an outstanding man and patriot as well. Everyone mentioned in this book, quite frankly, is someone you all need to look into. But when you get to, well, we can't really talk about your secret spot that you were running. I guess we can kind of go to the CTC era of things, because again, I'm not going to give away your book because there's a lot in here that people need to read, and we'd be here all day. When does Mr. Billy Waugh come into your chain of events of you working at the CTC and such?
I met Billy early on. I had met him before. In 1990, he came out to the Philippines. He was the head of our surveillance group there. And him and I just hit it off. I mean, he was with our paramilitary side of the house after his, heroic Vietnam eras. And I was also a Special Activities Division ground branch guy. And we hit it off. So I knew that he had been in Khartoum in the early 90s, 92 or so, 93. And when we opened up the Laden Task Force in late 95, he's the first guy that I reached out for, because I knew that that Billy had told me about this Bin Laden guy who most people didn't know anything about. And he was the ammunition for us putting together operational plans to neutralize Bin Laden, whether it was what we call a duct tape operation, a kidnapping or a rendition, or just killing him. It would have been very, very, very easy to do. That's where I met Billy, and we were friends until we lost him last year. As a matter of fact, I had the honor of joining two generals at SOCOM when we did his ceremony. I was one of the three speakers. I could speak to his agency career versus his military career, but very dear friend. Yeah.
He just salt of the earth gentleman. He I was lucky enough there at the probably a year, I'd say right at a year before he started getting sick, to where he ended up going to the assisted living facility. We had always emailed, but we finally got to where we started chatting a little bit there at the end. And boy, the stories, not just SOG, not just Vietnam, not just, agency work. I mean, the stories that man held and had in his head could fill books that would just blow minds. I mean, he is one of the most outstanding men I've ever come in contact with, to be honest with you.
Without there's only one Billy Wall. I mean,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, again, and if you don't have Billy Wall's book, you need to get that one, but also this one, because Billy's in this one. I'll show some photos in a minute, but a lot of folks don't realize that not only did Billy, working with you, for you, getting eyes on bin Laden, but he also found Carlos the Jackal. Not a lot of folks know about that. Were you in any work and capacity helping Billy on that aspect of that mission?
no. This was the early '90s, and I think it was, like I said, like around '92. I was in the Philippines, and he was sent to Khartoum because that was the original thing, was the Jackal, Carlos the Jackal. We got intelligence. There was Israelis intercepted a message that led them to believe that bin Laden that the Jackal, Carlos Ilis Ramirez, he was a terrorist of a very high degree, in mostly in Europe, did some incredible bad things. And Billy is the guy that actually, through intel work and surveillance and everything else, is the one that actually was able to geolocate him. And he's doing life in a French jail.
As well he should, being one of the most prolific and, depending on what you call successful, one of the most successful, because he was an evil man. He did a lot of atrocious things on behalf of and I can't really honor someone or say too good of things, but he was strictly the Hollywood terrorist, out for money, the highest bidder. He had no ideology. He supported whoever paid him. He'd take the money and would do the job. So he was, in my opinion, a scumbag of the highest order. And I'm very glad y'all took him off the battlefield.
No arguments from me on that one.
Love you. Sorry, that was my mother leaving. So wow. I mean, and again, I'm already getting questions about Mr. Billy, and guys, we'll to close out, we'll take some more questions on that. But around 95, you're in East Asia. You've gone on, now you're to the CTC. What is going on with Billy, seeing, already knowing about bin Laden, and the trigger was not pulled on that situation? How soon again until you start hearing rumblings of bin Laden? Is it the embassy bombing, or is he continually?
Yeah, no, we actually started the task force before the embassy bombings and before the call happened. Well, we already knew who he was, what he was doing. We could have got him in Khartoum, but eventually he got smart, and he went to Afghanistan, where you can't find people there. But yeah, no, I did not work the Carlos thing with Billy. I subsequently, after the time that I did at the Bin Laden Task Force, I was I was giving the Korea a program for the agency. That's how I made my flag rank, SIS-2. And so I was deputy chief of East Asia Division for Koreas. I was the title and the CIA representative at the NSC for everything Korean. And so I did that for 2 years, 98 through 2000. 2000, I went back to CTC, went out to that radical Muslim country that I can't talk about. I do talk about it in the book. I just can't mention the name of it. Came back from that, and I became the chief of operations at the Counterterrorist Center in May of 2001. And we all know what happened in September of same year.
Yes, unfortunately we do. With that, I mean, and that's really in the book when it really ramps up. What was I know we've got the Horse Soldiers movie. When they get in, and I'm always curious if, of course, you know, some things you can't talk about when we know that. When were the first men on the ground to answer the response for? Is that able to be said? Was it Special Forces? Was it the Jawbreaker team? Or
You know, that's I'm a big fan of our special operations forces. I've worked with them for Bragg for almost a decade at their ASOT course, and have family members that are former this or former that. And the movie that is called 12 Strong is the one that they depict, and it is the Horse Soldiers. Eventually, that was what the moniker was. But what people don't realize is that the first boots to the ground in Afghanistan was CIA. There's a guy named Gary Schroen. Gary Schroen was the team leader. He spoke the local language. He'd been in contact with the Northern Alliance from before. So the first American boots on the ground post 9/11 was an ODA-sized group of CIA, mostly paramilitary officers, and a couple of case officers and logistics guy. When the triple nickel Green Beret team came in, it was my guys vectoring that helicopter in. And sadly, in the movie, this is a very big pet peeve of mine. Sadly, in the movie, none of that is mentioned. It was funny because in the interviews prior to the movie, they interviewed he was a captain then, but he was a major when he was being interviewed, and his warrant officer who was his guy on the ground. And they, in the interviews, would mention, when we got there, CIA was there, they helped us, they were, side by side, tied to the hip with us, blah, blah. But in the movie, because of politics, that's not mentioned at all. And the CIA's involvement in early Afghanistan is relegated to one single white American guy on a donkey with bags full of money. And it shows the Green Beret guys going like, we don't know who the hell he is, but he's got some brass beep, And I was furious. Because I lost friends in that. Mike Spann, we Jennifer Matthews subsequently. And don't get me wrong, that Green Beret team did incredible things, and they deserve every single accolade that they received. The sad part is that, no fault of theirs, the Hollywood version of that was totally forgotten about what the agency really did and the impact of that. So
that if I remember correctly, they literally, as far as I know, I don't think they literally mentioned CIA one time in that entire movie.
Yeah. Like I said, just the one time, who is that guy? I don't know, but he's the guy bringing the money. That was their comment, which is bullshit. We flew in with $3 million, and one of the guys had to sleep on the $3 million every night. And that was parceled out. Yeah.
I can't imagine what that guy must have felt like having to sleep and bodyguard that $3 million. I can't imagine what $3 million looks like.
Well, a few boxes, but here's the hairy part that people don't understand. That team, Jawbreaker, flew into Afghanistan by themselves with not a single 911 capability. There was no extraction. There was nothing. They were there on their own to cement a relationship with the Northern Alliance and start calling in airstrikes and everything else that got the war going. It's the kind of thing that it's Hollywood should have picked up on that very, very hard, because it's, you get 10 guys going into the middle of Afghanistan with bad guys everywhere, controlled by the Taliban, controlled by Al Qaeda, and they're going to set up shop to start the war. Wow. Yeah.
I like to compare that Jawbreaker and some of the other CIA teams to the closest you get to SOG right now. That was literally being dumped with no QRF, no nothing, and hope you can get along with the indigenous men that you're set to meet up with.
Yep. Pretty hairy.
Oh, that's as the Vietnam vets like to say, that's a pucker factor moment right there. Let's see here. Okay. I know I've flipped around because I've got notes just everywhere. Gosh, I even forgot to mention in Korea the super note, but guys, y'all can read about that. I'd forgotten. You came across the North Korean money exploitation, which is a great chapter. Beirut and Hezbollah comes up. There was one particular thing that caught my eye, and I'm trying to find it, and I apologize for this. Gosh, I've completely gone blank on what I was about to ask you about this. With the first teams on the ground, and I've got a picture of Billy Walton show for this. Did how long when that Jawbreaker team got on the ground, the 12 strong came in. From that point on, when that first Jawbreaker team got on the ground, they were they never left, or I shouldn't say that team never left, but the CIA was there from then on out. That they had already planted the flag and were there.
Yeah, he was Gary Strong was released by another Gary, and it just grew. I mean, it was literally we have well over 100 people in country there pretty quickly. So,
wow, man, I have enjoyed Jack Murphy. As a matter of fact, has had a Jawbreaker team member and a Ranger reconnaissance company member, and those guys are hardcore. I recommend you guys check that out. Before
the Jawbreaker guy that he interviewed, because I know them both. He was a classmate of mine in spy school.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. He's a really he's actually probably, besides you and a few other guys, he's been my favorite guest Jack's had on. Just a stellar man. I know what I was going to ask, but I kind of backed up a little bit. I found it funny, or not funny, but a very interesting story that I think would be good before we kind of get towards the end. Could you talk about Mustafa and you capturing him and his plan to? I believe it was the airplane he was trying to get away, or thought he had found a way out, and y'all captured him.
Yeah, this happened right after 9/11. It was actually a pretty cool op. This little analyst came to me with the idea. This guy, we call him Mustafa because we're not allowed to say his real name. He was, I believe, PLO, Palestinian kind of guy, terrorist. He hijacked an airplane, landed in Pakistan, asking to refuel. The Pakistanis weren't playing. The electricity went out in the town like it does in third world countries all the time. And he thought that they were being raided. So they started killing the hostages, including throwing grenades into the airplane. He was captured, sent to a Pakistani jail for 14 years, and he was about to be released. So the idea that we concocted together, because he had killed Americans, there were Americans on that plane, so we could actually do the rendition, was that how do I say this? We got access into where he was being held in Pakistan and given him transportation that benefited our plan when he was released. So when he was released, he was given airline tickets that took him through one particular place that I can obviously not talk about, but that had agreed that if we could grab him before he touched ground, we could have him. So the plan was we got him the seat. It was 17A. He was up by the window. The 17B was empty. In C, there was a Japanese guy who happened to be a CIA guy, and he only spoke Japanese. And then behind him was one of my good friends from the SEAL teams. And the idea was, we had a van down there with the ground branch guys and two FBI agents, because we don't have arrest authority. They have to do the Miranda stuff. But the funny part of the story is that he gets on the plane. Plane takes off. The Japanese guy has some Playboy magazines or Hustler or something. This guy's been in a Pakistani jail for 14 years. So the Japanese guy says, "Oh, here, dozo." Gives him the magazine, and that was our distraction. That was how we were going to keep him occupied until we got the first leg. The airplane was a large airplane, but it's one of these that you disembark both from the tail end and from the front end, depending on where you're seating. And he was supposed to come out the back end. And that's where the white van with the guys with the black hoods were waiting for him. Well, he saw a lady who ended up being an FBI lady who just made eye contact with him, just barely eye contact. And he freaked out and he started going towards the front. And like I told you, if his feet hit the ground, we could not render him. We had to grab him and put him in the van before he did that. That was the deal with a local service. And so he's hauling down the steps of the front of the airplane, just as we were able to vector the van to go to the front. And when he sees the van, he turns around and starts running back up the stairs. And that's where the SEAL team buddy of mine was there, grabbed him by the neck and said, "Welcome to America," blah, blah, blah. They threw him in the van, and the rest is history. It's a great op.
I gotta say that is my one of my. It's hard picking a favorite story in your book, but the moment you said the Big SEAL met him as he came down and said, "Welcome to America," bleep bleep, I was like, "Gotcha. That's America for you. We're coming for you." And did the locals? And we'll be finishing up. I've had you way too long. Did the locals have any issues, or were y'all able to get them and take them back on?
They were happy. We were happy. Good allies. Like I said, I can't mention the country, but they're good allies, and they fight alongside doing different things for us. And so it was excellent operation.
Wow, that is, and especially when it runs so smooth like that, you can't ask for anything better. I'd like to before we hit questions, and again, I'm not going to cover everything because you guys need to get the book, and I've already noticed in the comments people are buying the book, which is wonderful. But I was curious if you could speak a little bit about your association with Mr. Eric Prince and your a little bit of time with Blackwater that you spent.
I'll do that if you give me a 2-minute break, because I'm an old guy. I have to hit the bathroom.
That's fine, sir. Absolutely. We'll sit here and wait. It's fine. And guys, while we're waiting, I will a poster wanted me to get a book list together of all of the guests that we've had that have books like Mr. Rick, and I will get a list together today, and I will post those for y'all. And comments coming in. We're going to close out the show after he speaks about Blackwater. we'll get Mr. Billy and Miss Annie talk about those two, since he's hooked up with them here recently and done some good work with them. And we'll hit y'all's questions, and we'll close it out for today, since he's been gracious enough to spend 2 hours with us, which we kind of went over, but he's being ever so gracious with us. So, and gosh, look at his trophy room back there, guys. You don't many times get to see stuff like that. If you look in that corner top over there, he's got his dagger, his SOCOM plaque right there. He's got his CTC hat. Let's see right here. Of course, his Black Ops. Looks like a Russian decommissioned grenade, maybe a V40 pocket grenade. Very, very cool. I'm sure he's got a better trophy room, because I saw him and Billy visiting. I'll share that video of Billy's trophy room. But we've had a great guest on. I was very glad we finally got Mr. Rick on. He is a wonderful man, personified the American dream, and just a wonderful man. Oh, we got him back.
I'm back. Feeling much better. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you wouldn't mind,
Yeah, I met Eric when I was chief of ops at CTC after 9/11. We needed security to help us protect our folks that were coming into Kabul, and we're a makeshift station that we came up with real quick. And so he came in, introduced himself. We spoke for a while, and we became friends. He was a hell of a patriot. Very smart guy. You have a guy that was a multi-billionaire because of his father, and he became a SEAL. Unfortunately, he didn't last there too long. He became a SEAL, but then his wife and his father passed away, so he was given compassionate leave out of there, and he started Blackwater. I think it's like 1997. When I retired, he asked me to come and join him. Primarily because when I did the training later in the book, much later in the book, there's some programs that I was able to brief the vice president on, but they wouldn't let me have too many details. But you could get a lot of the gist and a lot of the operations out of it. I would train at Blackwater, because if I went with the kind of guys and gals that I had doing the stuff that we were practicing to do in one of our training sites, the rumor mill would have been going through the roof. So with Blackwater, we were totally anonymous. Only he knew who we were and our names or anything. And so he got the bug about what we were doing. So when I retired, he asked me to join Blackwater to do the same thing for our Special Operations Command, for lack of a better word. And we did that for about 8 years with incredible success. I cannot go into any of that because none of that has been cleared, nor do I want it to, because it hasn't barely leaked. But I will tell you that me and my team had more fun during those 6 years that we probably did the last 6 CIA years. So it was quite an accomplishment. Unfortunately, he got wrapped up in the political machine, which again, I don't talk about politics, but he did, he got screwed pretty badly. Yeah. And they canceled all the programs out of the addictive, stuff. But yeah, those were good days.
He, and of course every group has some, but they get in my opinion, they get a bad rap on some things. Some guys like to call them cowboys, but you got a lot of skilled guys, especially in that early group. Like you said, when he had first set it up, a lot of SEALs, a lot of Green Berets, a lot of I've heard even a lot of retired unit guys came back to work with him. And yeah, I'm not a big political guy either, but he was completely screwed. He seemed like a very good man, a patriot, as you said, and a guy I'd like to hang out with, and seems like would like to go to war with if you had to. He seems like a good man. I've actually got a photo I'll show of y'all. there were a lot of missions for Blackwater. I think that came up. I know y'all are doing as I think you said bodyguard work, but could you explain a little bit about what some of that you can speak of what y'all were doing?
Well, you know, the main job of Blackwater, which I had very little to do with, that's me in Iraq, by the way. And Eric's on the other side of the aircraft. We were door gunners. We were actually running door gunner protection missions. But that's not what I went there to do. And that's what I cannot talk about is what I did for our special military side of the house. But Blackwater's mission was they got the WPPS program, which was through State Department. They were the sole providers or the primary providers of former special operations guys to provide security for all the personnel in the U.S. Embassy in Iraq at a time when, you know, Iraq was in nobody's hands. So I was there with Eric 85 and 86, I'm sorry, 2005 and 2006. And even when I left, Biop Road was still not secured. The road from the green zone to the airport, which was, I think it was like 8 kilometers, was still not secured. And that's the gauntlet these guys were running every single day. They did get a bad rap. They were, if you listen to one side of the story, is that they get set up in an ambush that was cleaned up, and they came across as they were the only people shooting, which obviously was BS. What people don't know are some of the stories of what they did, and there's two in particular that I'll cover really, really quick. The first one was the Polish ambassador's detail got hit, and he wasn't our client. He was not a Blackwater client, but there was a Blackwater team nearby, and when they hit the blue tracker, they responded and they killed all the bad guys and they saved the Polish ambassador. As a matter of fact, they got decorated by the Poles because of that. The second one was even hairier. There was let's call it a black site from different agencies that had security on it, had some Blackwater security guys on the roof. And all of a sudden, about 300 Mujahideen start attacking the place. And they're just shooting up the building, and people are shooting back. There was a Marine who took a round, had a second chest wound. He went down. They were running out of ammo, so they're calling Mayday. We need backup. So Air Force tried to come in. They got lit up like a Christmas tree. They had to back out. Army came in. They got lit up. They had to back out. And all of a sudden, one of the helicopter pilots from Blackwater flying a little bird like the one that you saw me on there. No gunner. It was just him and another guy. They brought the ammo. They came in through the backside, flying treetop, came up. He put the parapet, the left skid on the parapet of the building. The guy in the back throws the ammo on the ground, boxes and boxes of ammo, grabs the Marine, brings them on board, and they fly out and they rescue the Marine. And the Marine lived because of that. And they killed a ton of bad guys. They never were able to take the building. But you talk about, brass backbone, that guy was something else.
Holy cow. Wow. And I mean, there, as you said, that's not even their job, and they get the call that there's a tick or the ambassador is about to die, and boom, that Marine story. I mean, good God, wow.
Oh, you don't hear that.
No, and thank you for sharing that, because again, that all we hear is how bad, because politics with Eric, we don't hear the good, and I've never heard of that, and thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's and Scott Gross, again, he was military during this time, and he was talking about they also saved an entire platoon of Marines. Blackwater did.
These are just two of dozens and dozens of samples of stuff that these guys did out there day in and day out. I mean, You're talking at a time where we'd be sitting at the green, in the green zone, and we had a bar called Babel on bar, and we'd be sitting there having beers, and here comes the missiles or mortars. People wouldn't even move. They go, "Why? I'm going to run to where this thing is going to hit." Every single night, that area was getting bombarded 2 or 3 times a night during those deployments out there.
That is just amazing, and what a group of men. Did you have much contact with I know Blackwater was the biggest. Did they work with Triple Canopy, or was that much further on?
Competing, that was a competing organization. I had friends that worked for Triple Canopy. Eventually, they got bought out by both Blackwater and Triple Canopy, bought by Costellas Group.
Okay.
And they bought all that, but no, I never had any direct dealings with them.
Wow, man, what a guy, and Blackwater. You know, I'm glad you shared that to let people know that they don't have just bad juju behind them, if you will. They actually did do good. They've just got a crapshoot in the press. And I can't let you go if you can at least speak about it. You were around for really the introduction of the Predator drone systems, weren't you?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this. The Counter-Terrorist Center was the sponsor for the Predator, and I remember I was already chief of ops, and Kofor coming out of a meeting, and he was so angry because they were dicking him around. You know, the military was asking ridiculous prices for missiles, and for everything was our fault or everything was our cost. And he came really close to turning that program off. And come 9/11, there were 2 things, both out of the Counter-Terrorist Center, that were the game changer. One, we, CTC, had a relationship. CIA CTC had a relationship with the Northern Alliance. And number 2, we had the Predator. And there's a good story, a little too long for now, but of when I had OPCON on one of the missions there, and we got rid of about 17 guys on my trigger pull there.
Wow. I've got to say, I mean, thank God he didn't stay mad enough to not stay all in with that weapon system, because you talking about
That's a game.
Military life changing, history changing. I mean, the drone systems. I mean, good Lord have mercy. I mean, and surveillance, not just the Predator. I mean, the surveillance drones are just utterly game changing. All right. Before we get to the questions and the last few photos I have before we let Mr. Rick go, Jason, I forgot to bring it up. Could Rick speak about Mr. Gene Hassenfuss?
Yeah. Gene Hassenfuss was a former Marine. I think he's been taken down from their wall. He was a kicker in the Central America stuff. In other words, when we were resupplying the Nicaraguan Contras, he was in the plane. They would kick the bundles of weapons and ammunition and medicines and all that other stuff down. And the standard operating procedure was, if your aircraft went down and you survived, you had to go. If you were in the northern part, you go north. If you were in the southern part, you go south. And we would have our Contras go and provide you safe haven. Well, Hassenfuss gets on the plane. Plane gets hit by a shoulder-fired something from the Sandinistas. He had a parachute. That's one thing that he did have. He had a parachute with him. So when the helicopter got hit, when the aircraft got hit, he bailed out, and the rest of the crew were killed. He got on the ground. He pitched a hammock and just stayed there until the Sandinistas came and got him. What made it even worse was the fact that he had pocket full of what we call pocket litter: phone numbers, phone books, photographs, names of all kinds of stuff. And I was in charge of the southern part of that time when that happened, and I remember going to the command of the southern Contras And we mobilized we had about 3,000 guys on there. We mobilized every single contra we had moving in that direction, hoping that this idiot would move south and be rescued and not be captured. And obviously, that opened a can of worms, and what ended up being the Iran-Contra affair, which again is politics, and I don't get into that. So, but yeah, no, Hassan Fuss was he was not a very disciplined man. He was not a very respected man, and his performance during that whole episode was embarrassing to a very elite military thing, which is the Corps. Yep, that'd be him. And you can see the ragtag guys that got him. I mean, those are Sandinistas. Yeah.
I mean, that was one of the parts that in the book I was like, oh, Eugene, come on, don't. Just stood there and waited for him. I mean, and there you are scrambling troops to try and get him, hoping he's following what y'all had as SOPs, and no, he's gonna sit there and wait on them to capture him. There was a photo I wanted to bring up. I've got a few of you in the camp, but I wanted to show this one of you, and I think Mr. Kofer's in this with you and Mr. Billy.
No, actually, that's the guy on the left is Jose Rodriguez. He replaced Kofer as the chief of CTC, and next to him is me with in my blue shirt. Next to me is the legendary Billy Waugh. This is in my living room, by the way. Oh. And the last but not least is a Chief Master Sergeant Wayne Fisk, one of the most decorated PJs in the history of Pararescue. Sante Raid, Mayaguez, just an incredible friend. And imagine me having these three people in my living room. And Jose and I didn't do any talking. Everything was Billy and Wayne talking about, their forays out there. And I had my wife take this picture. It's very treasured.
That is a wonderful photo of four legendary men together. That is just outstanding. And guys, let me clear this up because folks misattribute a Billy Waugh photo. This is what Billy looked like when he was in Afghanistan. He's not the big old guy with the beard that folks see on the horse and all that. This is Billy. Billy was a little bit older, but still in good fighting shape, as you can tell. He was there to give it his all.
72 years old.
That's amazing. Did you have any? Did you get any contact with him while he was on the ground? Through him back at the base, or
obviously when he came out, we got to talk and everything else. And there's a cute story behind it. He went to Kofer and told him that he wanted to go to Afghanistan. And Kofer said, "You're too old. You ain't going to Afghanistan." And Billy said, "Kofer, I fought in Korea. I fought in Vietnam. I've been all over the world for you. I want to play in Afghanistan." And Kofer told him, "No, you're not." And Billy was Billy. Billy, had no clutch. And he looked at Kofer and says, "You owe me. I got you your senior grade when I captured Carlos the Jackal. You owe me." And Kofer literally threw him out of the office, kicked him out of his office. And Billy sat out there and pouted for about 3 hours. And I think it was Hank Crumpton and myself were called in by Kofer, and he's telling me, telling us, there's not, he comes over here and he gives me this crap and he wants, I ain't sending it. And I looked at him and said, "Kofer." I said, "Chief, what's the big deal?" He goes, "What if he gets killed?" I said, "Kofer, if Billy Waugh goes to Afghanistan and he survives, the legend lives on. If Billy goes to Afghanistan and he gets killed, the legend lives on. This is what Billy does. And, well, it's on you guys." And so we were able to send him. Hank Crumpton was in charge of SO, which was the group that was focusing on the paramilitary side of Afghanistan. Man. He's the real deal. if you know anybody who's got gets cocky in our profession, it's very hard to do when you're walking around with Cofer Blacks and Billy Waws and Dewey Claridges of the world. It's just too humbling to walk in in the shadow of giants. It keeps everybody humble.
I can imagine so. I can imagine so. Standing on the shoulders of giants. Here's a picture from Mr. Rick's book in a non-mentionable place. Mr. Rick right here. And those are some of his workers. They got stuck in the Jeep, or their Land Cruiser stuck. He's got a great historical photo section. I've got a few more, and I'll run through the comments, and we will close this out. But Mr. Rick mentioned what he carried into camps, and I believe that is your Browning and your knife and is that a Walther PPK?
Yep, I always carry one of those in my ankle.
Oh wow! What a you couldn't go wrong with the Browning High Power and a Walther PPK as your backup,
Yep.
and especially a mini grenade and that knife too. I bet, whoo, dang sure wouldn't want to cross you. And we've got that's your graduation. This is one of my favorites because people don't understand PJ gear. Look at what they dive in, guys, and jump into the water with.
That's 130 pounds of gear. And that photograph was taken in July in Homestead Air Force Base, South Florida. Needless to say, I was sweating. But what you have is a twin 42 tanks or 44s. Your main parachute is behind that. Below that is a two-man butt boat. They call it a butt boat. It's a little raft that you could put the patient that was floating on the water, whatever, in there. This thing here is 28 pounds. That's the medical kit, reserve. The AR would go in here, and you had a boot knife. So it was 130 pounds of gear. I weighed I say my weight now, about 170 pounds. Trying to get out of an airplane with 130 pounds of gear is quite fun.
Can't imagine getting out and then being in the water with 130 pounds of gear on. I mean, there is another PJ. This may be your after graduation.
That is we did a night scuba jump. It was the last thing that we needed to do. It was in the low 30s. This is up in Utah, and we did a night scuba jump. And this was the five guys that we graduated. The ones both at the end are dead. He died during the Vietnam era. He passed away a year or so ago. He was a classmate and a teammate of mine throughout. Cliff Cundy, super good dude. That's the first time we wore our berets.
Wow. And guys, it mentions that final exam in the book, and y'all see why it's so tough to pass that final that final test to become a PJ. It is no joke, and especially with the temperatures that Mr. Rick just explained. And here are two teaching. Oh, this one and a teaching photo, and we'll get to the questions, and we'll let you go today. But this is a great photo. I'm not even sure who that
Bay of Pigs guy, Gons. He was my helicopter pilot. We're in the Mesquite. All those are Mosquito Indians behind there. Yeah.
And you've got your jump wings, and I can't tell what the other design is that you've got on there.
Right, yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Those three bars were captain in the Honduran Air Force.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now I can correctly attribute that and not mess that up. And to close out, before we do the run through the questions for everybody, I wanted to show Mr. Rick teaching. There's several good photos of him teaching, but this is a very cool one of him. Is that a RPG 7?
Yep, that's an RPG 7 round. Yes.
Wow. And would one day consist of each weapon system, or was this just a overall demonstration for everybody to kind of get their
class? This was a class for how to shoot the RPG. There was you go through the basics, how far it arms, what you got to do with this to activate the round before you fired it, and then demonstrations by me, and then everybody who was going to be issued one would have to practice with it a couple of shots under my supervision. So.
We see online a lot. Did you have any issues with guys not minding their back blast?
No, because the way that I taught it is I always put cardboard behind the blast zone, and I used to draw a person on it, and I wouldn't say anything. I would just fire the darn thing, and then I would bring him over and go, "This is why you don't stand behind these things." There's a Rambo, and I love Rambo movies. Don't get me wrong, but there's a Rambo movie where he is in the helicopter, and he's got the POWs that he just rescued in the back seat, and I think he's on a river or something, and he fires the RPG-7 from inside the helicopter. It would have cooked every single guy back there, but hey, Hollywood is Hollywood. But yeah.
Yep, he had acted like he had crashed in the river and popped that window out, and that MI8 came, and I that's immediately when I first saw that, I was like, dang, Rambo, after all that work, you just killed all those POWs with that back blast.
Yeah.
All right, we will go through actually most of the comments I'll show you, but we had to bring this up because she is an awesome lady, and we're hoping to have her on here soon. Glil was wondering if you could speak about Miss Annie Jacobson and how you came to meet her, and y'all hook up for Surprise Kill Vanish.
Annie's one of the most exceptional writers I've ever seen in my life. She's got dozens of books out there. I think Operation Paperclip was a runner-up for the big literary award that escapes me now. What happened was she was writing Surprise Kill Vanish, and Billy is kind of like the main interlocutor. He's the protagonist, for lack of a better word, of most what goes on in the book. There's a few pages on me there, but she actually reached out to me through Billy and said, "Look, Rick," says, "I want to talk to you." And I had never spoken to a reporter in my life, ever. I'd never done that. And she said, "This is for Billy, and I have some questions, but she said, I've debriefed 20 ground branch guys, Special Activities Division ground branch guys, and your name came up with most of them. I just want to pick your brain." So she literally came to my home in Florida, spent a whole day with me here. And it was during that time that she heard my part of the story. She is the person that finally kicked me in the butt and made me write the book. She actually,
Miss Annie.
She actually called her agent on the spot, and she told me, says, "I have never turned my agent on to anybody because that's a competition." But so that was the agent that he was my literary agent.
Holy cow!
She's the most amazing person because look, writing my book wasn't easy, but it's my story. All I had to do was maybe call a friend and, "Hey, were you wearing blue or were you wearing black, or were we drinking this or were we drinking?" But I know the story because that's what I'm walking through. Annie interviewed over 100 people for this book, Surprise Kill Vanish, and it's a very good book. I highly recommend that too.
Absolutely. If I had it with me, I'd show it. I've got all of her books. All of them are in there. That's the one I just finished reading, Phenomena, and she any topic she sinks her teeth into, she gives it her all. And as you said, Operation Paperclip, well, it's not my favorite now because Surprise Kill vanishes with you and Billy and Mr. Lou Merletti. But besides that, I would say Paperclip is her best work to date because she's got another one that's sure to knock our socks off.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad she got you to write the book. She's an outstanding woman. I was very honored this past December to finally get through to her and us set up a time. Hopefully next month, or well, it's February now, this month, to have her on, and I'm sure your name will come up when we talk to her. But I just wanted to show you some of the comments before we end. It is men like these that have blazed a path into the battlefield that future generations can follow. Eric, absolutely correct. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Billy's book, top 3 ever. Well, Frank, if when you get Mr. Rick's book, you can probably add that one. You'll have to move one of your other books out. Frank's buying. Well, Frank, oh, I think he means he's buying your book now. Good. Just got Hunting the Jackal. There we go. Glenn, you're going to enjoy that. Black Ops. And several other people have said that. But Jason, whose father was a CCS and CCC SOG recon man, said, great podcast. Much respect to Mr. Rick Prado. My dad went to work for the agency after the attacks in 2001. He worked overseas from 01 to 05 until cancer took his health from him. His name was Jack.
God rest in peace. Good man.
Very good man. Very good man. Let me make sure I don't have any questions here. Annie is literally the reason. Yes, Jason runs a great Twitter page. That's the reason he got started. Annie's book on Billy and you. So that's amazing. Annie, yes, absolutely amazing woman. Don't want to get anything Rick can't talk about, but I see he had some awards and commendations that are still classified that will never become declassified.
No, actually, upon retirement, I got to keep all my medals. The first one was for the Mosquito Indian diving, blah, blah, blah. That was my first medal. I got the George Bush medal for excellence in counterterrorism. And I got the highest medal that they present a retiring officer from the agency. So, and there's commendations and a couple of other things. But no, I was lucky enough that all those are now public and they're sitting back there somewhere.
We were spotting some of your awards and your knife back there, and what I believe is a decommissioned Russian grenade, which is very awesome to have in your trophy stand.
That was taken from a raid in Honduras.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The terrorist safe house that we helped the Honduras take down. And the EOD guy diffused that for me, and I've had it ever since.
That is just amazing. And sir, we're gonna. Well, first off, is there anything you would like to say as we close out?
No, thank you very much. I appreciate what you guys do. You know, podcasting has become quite a phenomenon, especially after the Cove. But it is such a great venue for people to listen to different stories. Yeah, we've been at this for a little over 2 hours, but I think we covered a third of the book. But still, is a lot that we learn from the kind of work that you guys do. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, and we, quite frankly, we covered years, but we didn't. There's a lot of stuff in here, guys, that you're going to be A, surprised about, and B, shocked and can't believe Mr. Rick's still here to talk to us and share these stories with us. Quite frankly. I want to thank you again. I did not intend to keeping you 2.5 hours this morning, but we sure as heck appreciate it. We appreciate your service. And if any chance down the road, we might can have you back to chew the fat and talk, we would love to have you back sometime.
All right, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful day, sir.
Same to you, bud. Bye-bye.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.